Welcome to our SkillsWave webcast, where we explore the challenges and innovations in corporate learning. SkillsWave is redefining workforce transformation with its free, AI-powered upskilling and education benefits platform.
Welcome, everyone, to this webinar sponsored by SkillsWave, who is a next-gen company changing and participating in the massive transformation of upskilling across industries. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you listeners out there to what I believe is going to be a very provocative and engaging conversation. I am still pinching myself, to be honest with you, because I can't believe I got these four rock stars in a room together at the same time to talk about something that's so near and dear to me, which is where we're going in the world of talent. And a big part of talent, of course, is upskilling and reskilling people, which is near and dear to all of us. So we have four amazing guests today that I want to introduce. In the interest of time, we have Rob Lauber, an upskilling thought leader who has impacted millions of people. He was the visionary CLO at Taco Bell and then was recruited to become the CLO at McDonald's. And he sees that moment in time to launch the biggest workforce brand in the world, Archways to Opportunity, which serves millions of people and has gone on to rock the world of learning and development for frontline workers in the QSR business. Since Rob initiated Archways to Opportunities, so many QSRs and other organizations with large frontline workforces are benefiting from education as a benefit, which did not exist prior to them taking that stage. Rob now runs a strategic advisory firm for enterprises focused on transformation, as well as high growth companies like Guild, Acadian Ventures, a host of others, and he's also a strategic workforce board member at GSV Ventures. Rob, it's so great to have you here.
Happy to be here.
And then we also have Dr. Keith Keating, whom I have watched just literally soar to the top of the stratosphere in the learning and development world. Keith was originally at GP Strategies, went on to a number of roles, and is now the current CLO at BDO Canada. He is also, and he won't tell you this, so I'm going to, he's way too modest, but he's the author of the best-selling book, The Trusted Learning Advisor, a key book for any of you who are advocating on behalf of learning and development, advocating on behalf of upskilling, and you want a place at the table. You need to listen what Dr. Keith has to say about that. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ron. I really appreciate that introduction. Couldn't have written it better myself.
Yes. Oh, and I forgot, you have another book coming out shortly, and had just so many things going on over the past 18 months. It's been fun to watch him rocket to the stratosphere. Now, we also have with me a friend that I've met several years ago and am a colleague with in the world of podcasting, among other things. But Jeff Roach is a self-described son of a nurse, and I think that informs all of his care first forward thinking in the world of education. He's currently director of workforce at Siemens Healthineers. It's great to have you, Jeff. Not only are you doing that job, not only are you a featured speaker all over the world, but you're also at the same time, just in your spare time, a doctoral student working on his PhD. So welcome to the show. That's a lot in a 24-hour pack of a day. I'll say that.
Thank you, Ron. And look, I'm just trying to follow Dr. Keating, so we're following his footsteps.
Yeah, but you've got
There you
kids
go.
too, so you're winning.
And then we have, as I like to call her, the indefatigable, incomparable Dr. Sasha Zacharie-Voinovich. It's such a treat to be able to collaborate with Dr. Sasha. She is currently the president of SkillsWave, the host of this show today. And SkillsWave, just to give you all a perspective, is a next-gen employee workforce platform launched by D2L, one of the leading learning platforms out there, which was founded by John Baker, who also is the founder and CEO of D2L. And he is all about, through SkillsWave and through D2L, about the world of engaging students and bringing engagement into this online learning world. So Sasha has served in so many varied capabilities. I think she brings so many rich experiences working in the public sector at Tri-C's, Cuyahoga Community College, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, and LSU on the for-profit education front at National University and Southern New Hampshire, and then of course now at D2L and SkillsWave. So Dr. Sasha, thank you for being here and putting this all together and sponsoring us.
You
I want to
always
get
make me feel like oh, sorry, Ron. You always make me feel like a million bucks. So
Well,
thank you.
you guys, I mean, hats off to all of you. I mean, these are distinctive, impressive impacts that each of you had in this world of learning and development. And I want to start with you, Dr. Keith, because I think what you've been working on the last 2 years has a big bearing on this conversation. And that is, if we are engaged in a massive transformation about the way we upskill and the way employees are building a lifelong career journey, then it means that those who know something about it, ipso facto, this room and beyond, learning professionals, then they need to be part of the conversation. And you've been conducting workshops, you've been doing speaking all the way to the World Economic Forum on this topic of the trusted learning advisor, being a participant and an active player in that conversation. I'd like you to comment on that in what you're seeing as you've been going out there and talking to people. Is it bringing them to the table, and are you unleashing their spirit? It seems to me you are, so that people are more proactive about getting involved and getting immersed and achieving influence without authority.
Hey, that's definitely the goal. But first, let's just acknowledge yourself, because the four of us wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for your great coordination. So thank you for creating this opportunity for the four of us, but also for all the viewers. In response to your question, I would say there are 3 key points that I want to just talk about for a moment. When we think about our voice as learning and development practitioners, I think the first step in creating that voice is establishing our credibility. And I think as learning and development practitioners, we have to ask ourselves 2 questions. What have I done to earn that credibility? And why should my stakeholder believe me? We often end up demanding this respect and this credibility from our stakeholders without actually doing the due diligence to earn it. And so to me, credibility comes from having a clear point of view. It's backed by data, it's backed by research, by experience. And too often we don't respect the craft enough. One of the beauties of our industry is, in some ways, there's a very low barrier to entry. You don't have to have a certification. You don't have to have a specific degree. Anybody can, and many people do, just go to LinkedIn and say all of a sudden, I'm a fractional CLO. And then you look and you dig in and you ask, well, how did you build up that credibility and experience? And so for us, in order to have that seat at the table, we've got to be shaping the conversation, and order takers don't have a point of view. Trusted learning advisors do, and that's backed by data and research. I have a couple other points I could share, but let me stop there in case you want to respond.
Yeah, no, I think it is about empowerment, and I think it is about learning what's important to be able to play that important role in the conversation. You have to have the stuff, right? I mean, it's really down to basics. If you're not a credible representative of the learning and development practice, then you're probably not best suited to be carrying that conversation around an organization. On the other hand, you have a lot of, quiet killers out there who are fantastic at this and just need a little nudge, I think. And I think a lot of people have benefited from your book because they got that needed nudge to start putting themselves in the conversation. You were talking about making sure that there's an ROI and there's an investment associated with all this learning and training as well. And I want to turn over to Rob Lauber, because Rob, you shared something curious and interesting with us before we went live, and that is that it was 5 years into the program where you launched the world's biggest global workforce platform and brand, Archways to Opportunity, at McDonald's. And just to remind you all, that's a $25 billion operation with over 1 million employees. And Rob, you did a lot of things to look at the skills gap, and somehow you managed to move an entire executive team in alignment with your vision to change the game entirely for frontline workers. And you did it without saying, oh, I've got the ROI, I can show you how it's going to do. And yet you did it on more than just faith and a promise. So I want you to unpack that for us, because it was a spectacular journey to be a part of. I self-admittedly, was a participant in it with you as a partner, and it was awe-inspiring to see the impact it's had on the organization over the last 10 years.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. And I think a lot of it was really driven out of, waiting 5 years to do the ROI was really driven out of where we started, which was against a few hypotheses, I guess I would say, right? We were convinced that, one, we could improve our employer brand, perception in the marketplace, which, right out of the gate, which would be helpful from a brand recognition, from McDonald's as an employer, which makes people feel better about the brand, which makes people shop at the brand more often, right? So I think very sort of business transactional sort of hypothesis there. The second one was that we believed that that if we could get our franchisees engaged in the process, which we work very hard to do, that it could be very attractive to them in terms of being able to attract and then frankly retain people at the restaurants by giving them a reason to be there beyond just serving customers, that they can give them connect with a personal reason why they would want to work at McDonald's. And franchisees are small business owners. There's about 2,000 of them in the U.S. They're in your small towns and probably wherever you are on this call today around the world. They need some of those big company benefits to be able to compete with other employers in the space. And this was one way we saw that we could help them in the attraction side. We waited on the 5 years piece mostly because we believed that we needed some soak time on some of our hypotheses. One of them was that people would stay longer, which is a very hard thing to do, say, after a 90-day pilot. Did people stay longer or not, right? You can't really do that. And so we wanted to be able to measure, for example, a big one was, do people involved in this program stay longer at McDonald's? Not stay forever, because we don't, at the time, McDonald's didn't believe that, they were an employer for life, and I'd say probably still the same today. We're a destination that helps you get to other destinations along the way. The first
America's step. Just interrupt, but America's best first job, right? It's
the
job where you acquire some skills and you get some training and you get interested and understood about what it's like to work for the first.
Right. Like every first job might be your best first job, but not necessarily your best second job, right? So so that was sort of the mindset we were using there is, how do we position ourselves as a best first job? And a best first job, you get a lot of life skills, but you also get access to things that are going to help you overall. So if you want to be a nurse, then you can definitely pursue nursing while you're working at McDonald's. And how do we break down those barriers while you work there? So the ROI study was really about, the hypothesis that people would stay longer. What we found is they stayed 3 times longer than average. So the average tenure of someone in the program was about 33 months versus the 11 months that we were traditionally used to. And translating that back into business was really important. It's like, so they stay longer, what does that mean? We knew that restaurants where tenure was longer, not necessarily turnover as a measure, but tenure as a measure, where people stayed longer performed better as a whole. And so this was a good way to sit there and say we could positively impact the performance of the business by finding ways to get people to stay longer, yet at the same time create some incentive for them to do that. And the Archways Opportunity Program was and still is a great sort of program to be able to make that happen. So it's definitely, you give me more credit than I deserve on it for sure. There were a lot of people in favor of this activity, and there were certainly people that are still there that were really instrumental in really making that happen and come to life.
Right. I mean, you had a great team behind you with Lisa Schumacher and Marianne Marola and Aaron Voss, and they were all really staunch supporters, and they just delivered. I do want to give the audience, though, a stark piece of context here, and that is I was invited because I was working with Rob at the beginning of this initiative. I was invited to the yearly investor meeting. And pretty excited, to go out there and to meet with the investment community and hear the senior leadership team talk to the investors. And it would not be overstating it to say that it was like walking up to the edge of a moat in a castle and looking down and seeing people with pitchforks. I mean, I expected people to be there, to be excited, to be, having access to their leadership and all that, and it was not a happy group. And so it's not a small thing to say that you want to improve the brand. That can sometimes sound nebulous, but it's the brand is it's built on experiences like that, and people were really hostile about it. So
Sure.
I have a question out there, which I'm going to interrupt before I go on to Jeff and ask, what advice would you give someone who's trying to prove the value, the impact of their education program? What's a way to get that executive buy-in? That's a great question out there. Rob?
You need me to answer that? I think you've got to find the business case, I would say, in your organization, and it's unique to every organization, right? Others, Starbucks had college access program, Walmart has program, Disney has the Aspire program, all with sort of common themes in terms of helping people advance their education, or frankly, for this conversation, upskill themselves to be more valuable in the marketplace. Right, is probably a better way to put it, because it's not necessarily about degrees from an education perspective. It might also be about certificate programs or skilled trades. And so there's definitely a business side of the equation that is the best path to getting it across the finish line with your executive team, because these programs tend to not be inexpensive, and they tend to be adjacent to the business priorities of selling more X services or product or whatever it might
Really
be.
great point. Yep.
Right. And so you really have to sort of play on the fringe of the intangible, yet at the same time be able to quantify the value of those things.
I think that's some great advice. So now I want to pivot the conversation. We came here to talk about talent management in the age of AI and what's happening. Lots of transformation. As I like to say on my podcast, Disrupt Ed, we live in a 5G wired, workforce augmented, technology interconnected, globally interdependent, AI accelerated, Web3 immersive, pandemic interrupted world of work.
Can you
That's
say
what
that again
people are
3 times
dealing with.
fast?
That's what people are dealing with. So massive transformation, as we've not seen, and I would hasten to guess that all of you would agree, you have not seen this level of disruption and transformation in your earlier careers at the level, pace, and depth and breadth of it that we're seeing right now. Is that a fair statement?
That is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
think
so,
I think especially pace. So
yeah,
I'm probably the oldest guy on this call, and so I'll remember when the
no,
internet
not even
landed on
close.
people's desks, and e-commerce became a reality. Super disruptive in the workplace as well, but it took place across multiple years more than what you're seeing now is multiple months.
Right. And so now here are the two uh, global events that are happening simultaneously. We have this unharnessed, new, massively disruptive technology called AI. And we also have an epic moment in the world of talent. The number one business challenge that most CEOs reflect on these days is they can't find enough talent to grow their business. That is the biggest break on their growth engine. And so you've got to marry those two up. But it seems to me, help me understand it, that this is still a wild west out there where the technology has people concerned about taking people too far by impeding truthiness, if you will, in terms of knowledge and information, misinformation, but also privacy issues, governance issues. So, Jeff, I'll start with you. Where do you see AI coming into this, and where are you at with it in your organization, or you're seeing it within the healthcare industry? Because it's one of the most disrupted worlds right now is how we're delivering healthcare. And you have all these people that are burning out from the post pandemic. So you're seeing massive numbers of people leaving the hospital and healthcare industry, and we can't afford for that to continue. We need to bring them back. Upskilling and bringing new people into it is one way, but how do you see this against the backdrop of AI coming into the picture?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting, Ron, because obviously, if there's an industry that's actually had AI in it for a very long time, and I mean, for at least over a decade or longer, it is healthcare. And so, the reality of it is most people haven't realized that, but many of the imaging devices, the surgical devices, so many aspects that actually deliver access to care have had AI in there. And here's the deal: it hasn't hurt us. It's actually made care better. It's allowed us to detect diseases. It's aided our providers, our physicians, and our surgeons to be able to do what they need to do. And so, from a healthcare perspective, I'll say this: look, I think just like to Rob's point, when we were seeing that, the change of the internet, there's a lot of people who get concerned. But I think ultimately, with the workforce shortage and crisis that healthcare is facing, probably worse than, in my opinion, any other industry, because we're talking about literally people on the front lines of caring for others. There's actually a little bit more, excitement in some way, because AI has the opportunity to make the work a better place. AI has a way for us to stop the click, click, click on electronic medical records, enhance some of the things we have to do in finance and medical, in those respective areas. Certainly has a way to help us navigate, the types of things that, frankly, we shouldn't have our nurses, our physicians, and providers do, so that they can actually be fully devoted to taking care of their patients. And from a learning and development standpoint, I haven't necessarily met that many L&D folks in healthcare that are scared about it. I've actually seen more interest in how it can help them to deliver additional value. And where I've seen there needs to be work on is getting the departmental leaders to understand. And this is where as somebody who's in academia as well, I always say, I don't know why academia is getting so flustered over this. I mean, let's be honest, some of the faculty shouldn't even have jobs because, some of the ways that they're teaching is not effective from an industry perspective. And so if it's going to help bolster the learning and development, I get excited because honestly, when I think of my college experience, I could name probably 5 or 6 different faculty members that obviously didn't teach anything in an effective manner. And I could go on AI and learn a lot more effectively, frankly. And so I think we need to embrace this, and we need to, to your point, have the right principles around it. And here's the final point I'll make. When I think of the work that Rob did, healthcare has benefited tremendously from the work that Rob and his colleagues did. And when I think about what AI presents, we have a great opportunity to achieve more career and economic mobility when we actually bring learning in a personalized manner. And so for me, I'm excited.
I think you make a really good point about impacting more lives through education, because I think before Rob in the high school program unfolded at McDonald's, you had a lot of people thinking that college was the only answer, and I think several things have created an alternative narrative about that. Number one, the cost has gone completely off the rails over the last 30 years. It's exceeded inflation 30 years in a row, and so we've got to look at that. But you also have all these technologies that have enhanced the way we deliver learning. So it's addressed many of the barriers to access. You don't need to have daycare now. You don't need to have, you don't need to go somewhere in some cases. And the quality of the instruction is improving day by day with new technology. So, I'm going to throw this over to you, Sasha. You're working at an organization that is working directly with a lot of corporations, and you've created this next generation AI infused and accelerated learning platform. What are you seeing from clients as you're talking with them about how the learning and the upskilling is changing with AI, and the delivery of it.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. I think the first thing is that each business is unique in what they necessarily need from it. So there's a lot of emphasis, like Rob was saying, on ROI for sure, but what that ROI is or looks like to each business is somewhat unique, right? There's commonalities, but it is somewhat unique. Um, I think one of the advantages and one of the ways in which AI can be really effective is helping to focus and narrow what someone needs to work on or needs to know, to target the learning. I think, you go on, you can use AI to discover almost anything. But the thing that's different about Gen AI, because Jeff was saying AI in and of itself has been around for quite some time. We're talking about like the type of AI, right? And the amount of data and how accurate it can be now in a different way. But allowing learning experiences to be targeted, because you can just let the technology loose, right? But it's sort of like giving someone who's never seen an iPhone is they're actually not going to use it super efficiently, right? There's going to be apps they don't know about. There's going to be things they don't know how to do. I still remember when my father-in-law was like, I was like, you need to close these tabs eventually. He had like 140 tabs open on his phone, right? We can't assume that just because the tool exists, people know how to use it. It's the same thing with a platform like ours, like other people's. Even an LMS, whatever your talent system could be, it's not enough to just let it loose onto the world. Like you have to help people target what path they need to actually learn the thing that's going to take them where they are. And sometimes people are not incredibly self-aware as to what their own skill set is. So when you take like a signal, right? Like a degree is a signal to the marketplace, to the employer. It's a proxy for skills. It's like a shortcut. It's like, okay, you have this degree, so we infer you know these things. Well, the great opportunity with targeted skills training, right, or something that's smaller, is that you can be more specific about what that thing is, but the person doesn't necessarily know. And so using AI to sort of target those pathways, like GPS, you are here, and here are your options, and here's how you match with those things, right? That can help narrow that path, because the universe of options is endless right now. The question is not, is the learning out there, or can I find the right thing? It's how long will it take you to find the right thing? And so getting as specific as possible on how to get from point A to point B, because, the world is moving faster every single day. Like Rob just said, the pace of change, totally different. I remember one of my mentors once told me, today is the slowest day your life will ever be. And then tomorrow will be the next slowest day your life will ever be. So we can use these tools to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of learning, but only if we're intentional about it, right? You let somebody loose into the universe, they're going to wander forever.
Right. Well, it's fascinating that the widespread adoption of AI into the healthcare industry transformed the way it started to be used in the delivery of learning and development in the hospital industry. I want to go to Keith though, because in your industry, BDO has been an early adopter. You've been working with Microsoft. You've been doing AI as part of a rigorous part of your talent development strategy and your learning strategy. I'd like you to unpack some of the things you're doing there, because I think there's a lot of people out in our audience that are exploring where they should be in the use of AI and what guardrails they should put up. And you've kind of gone through a bunch of that.
We have. I would say first, for learning development practitioners, it's picking it up and learning it yourself. I get there's regulations that your company may have. We all have personal devices of some sort. And I'm still coming across talent practitioners who are saying, I'm not really comfortable with it yet. You don't have a choice anymore. Get comfortable with it. There is no version of the future that exists without AI. That genie is completely out of the bottle at this point, and not engaging in it is going to leave you left behind. And this is a great opportunity. It's a democratic opportunity. We're all at the same starting line, but we have the opportunity to drive the adoption within our organizations and figure out how we can leverage it. Even if we can't officially leverage it, you can still be doing the research to figure out opportunities that your stakeholders could be using it for. And so at BDO, luckily, we're in a really unique position. We've been one of the first professional service firms to fully embrace an AI first mindset. And it's from the top of the organization all the way down. It's in everybody's strategic performance objectives for the year. We were using Copilot before Copilot was launched. We've been a partner for Microsoft. We've been using ChatGPT Enterprise. We've got all these bots that we've been creating to help us be efficient in a number of ways. So, for example, from an L&D perspective, we used it from a skills competency matrix. So we had one, but could it be better? And that was an opportunity for us to align our data, to leverage AI, and to really lean in so that we could create a clear framework for what skills are needed at each level across the organization and how might that build up your profile and build up your experience. And so we use it to help us analyze industry benchmarks and best practices and internal expertise. And we create this structured skill development approach. And so that's from the skills perspective. And then outside of that, we're using it to analyze our client needs, to track emerging trends in the industry, future forecasting, to ultimately identify service opportunities for our clients. And so when we take those two, we take the insights from our competency matrix, we mirror that with equipping our teams with the right skills that they need to strengthen those client relationships. Ultimately, it drives business growth. And at the end of the day, that's what every company wants, every firm, every organization. We're here to grow our business, and AI is a fantastic enabler of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Rob, you sit on a very interesting perch right now. You run a strategic advisory firm that advises CLOs and C-suite executives on transformation and high growth strategies. And AI and talent development are part of that. What are you seeing? It seems to me there's a very wide swath of adoption levels we're seeing out there. You have organizations that are not embracing it all. We were talking about this off camera about organizations that haven't started using it. We've talked about organizations that are trying to get their governance in place because they're markedly concerned about going beyond the guardrails. People ultimately have checked themselves. They've started doing things, and then they find employees have gone a little bit too far, and they have to rein them in. So it's not that they were doing it intentionally. It's just the tool is extremely powerful, and unguided could really wreak havoc on privacy on a whole bunch of things. So what are you seeing out there in the industry that captures your imagination here?
Yeah, well, I'll start with, I think what Keith said about growth is like sort of the foundational driver behind why a lot of these conversations are going on in organizations, like the upskilling conversation, the need for business to grow in the headwind of a declining workforce in terms of workforce population availability, right? So with that as sort of a backdrop, I'm seeing that like that's sort of the common theme. I think that's not necessarily unique. Every company's sort of chasing that. I think the path on how you get there is, and the readiness to embrace some of these quickly coming into the marketplace technologies is really the challenge. And some of that goes to the size of your organization and the resources that you have readily available to you. If you're in a large multi-billion-dollar enterprise like Microsoft, right, you can be out in front of those things. But if you're in a smaller business, I don't know, a 500 restaurant chain, it might be a much different story where your capabilities in your organization might not be the same from an IT perspective, from an understanding perspective, from from an ability to transform perspective in an organization. So I do think that you're seeing different organizations, as you mentioned, on a spectrum of don't use it at all to we're all in an AI first strategy. And I think that over time, you're going to see everyone sort of move to an AI first strategy. But I think there's still organizations that will be behind the curve in trying to figure out the best way for them to get there, because I do think it's unique to the particular businesses that you're in. And there's also, a value equation that organizations are looking at in terms of, seems like you can apply AI to everything. That's not necessarily good, right?
Right.
Where are the biggest, highest value spots to begin, right? Like in healthcare, is it in diagnosis? Is it in patient care? Is it in, is it in scheduling? I don't know, right? Those kind of things in the construct of really figuring out what's going to drive organizational value for you as being places to start. And even then in functions like L&D functions, thinking about where it's going to drive value for you. What's the best place to start? What's the best way to approach it? It is really a bit variable by organization.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, Sasha, Rob was talking about big organizations, big firms utilizing this and driving change toward business growth. And each of the three of you, Keith, Jeff, and Rob, have all worked in multi-billion-dollar organizations. Sasha, you and John Baker have an interesting, different proposition that you're putting out there, it seems to me, because you're looking at the world, through D2L is everywhere. It's a ubiquitous brand and it's a ubiquitous platform out there. And then you've now created Skills Wave as part of that. But your goal is actually, as I understand it, to chase the mid-market and to look at companies, not the biggest companies, but the ones that can't afford not to keep up with some of the best practices in those organizations, because otherwise they risk losing that talent. They don't want to be on the back end. They don't want to be the third or fourth choice of every employee that's out there being recruited, because they're small and they don't have the same resources. So I'm curious what you and John have cooked up here. I think it's worth exploring a little bit on what you're going to start to see with AI, with talent development in the mid-market, with mid-sized and small companies, because
Yeah.
they're really the backbone of the growth story.
Yep. So, not to say that we would turn away business from large organizations, just to put that out there. We do have the largest retailer in Canada is actually one of our clients, and we're going to market in the US. So anyone who's interested, but I think what we're going to see in sort of that mid market is really there are going to be winners and losers in this space, right? So there's increasing consolidation all over the place, all sizes of businesses, but AI is like a force multiplier, right? So people who have that advantage it's more than a +1, it's like a +10 or it's a +100 if you can figure it out well. And you're seeing this even with large retailers, large software companies, and how they're able to achieve a lot more by using these AI development tools. And that's something that small and mid-sized businesses can't afford to miss, right? If you don't have skilled employees, if you have someone who's dragging and you're a 50-person company, that's a significant part of your workforce, right? If you have 10 people that aren't really upskilled and know what they're doing in a 500-person company, that's not negligible, right? Whereas if you can get ahead of the curve, because not everybody's going to make it. Like not every business is going to be able to do this well. And so I think now the next couple of years, like it's a really important moment in time. I think this is very similar to like when the internet went from 0 to 600, right? Like that's where we are right now with AI. Only it's going to be, I heard the term cognitive revolution the other day. Like people who can work with AI are going to be the ones that drive businesses towards outsized growth. And that's where like small and mid-sized businesses, they don't always have a super robust learning and development organization that can go out and curate specific things. So that's where I think technology and platforms can have a really important impact in being able to do that. Like it's a little meta, right? And by meta, I don't mean the company. It's a little bit like using AI to figure out how to learn best, with AI to deploy it in your organization. And so those differently sized businesses, I mean, we see some people just like going for it, which is amazing. But then businesses are busy, right? They're busy with a lot of competing priorities, and sometimes the learning and development is looked at as an expense rather than as, you know, a
An
critical
investment,
growth.
right?
Yeah, it empowers the rest of the business, and I don't think that's ever been more important. I'm not trying
Well,
to like Skynet may be coming, but until that, we have to really have a qualified workforce.
right. We absolutely do. Now, the four of you have gone and done it. You've provoked all these questions from our audience. So I'm going to take a few minutes to answer, to have you guys ask them. The first one's to you, Keith. What are the top three things corporate organizations are looking for from their trusted learning advisor? And what is the best way for a university to get their attention as a viable trusted learning advisor?
That's very broad, two completely separate questions. Let me focus on
Yeah,
the first part of that because I've already forgotten the second part. I would say the
I'll
first
give it to you
part
again.
is um, check out the book, The Trusted Learning Advisor, for all the answers to your questions. But besides that, as I was sharing earlier, it's about your credibility and establishing and acknowledging and creating your credibility first. I would say the second, and Rob started to speak about this a bit, it's understanding the business case and particularly understanding your stakeholders' business as just as good as them, if not even better than them. And that means that we need to speak their language. We need to understand their challenges, and we need to position learning as a solution to their real problems, not necessarily what we think as L&D practitioners. If we can articulate their business pain points before they do, you don't have to fight for that voice. They start coming to you. And I would say for the last point, it would be stop waiting for a seat at someone else's table and build your own table. And what I mean by that is create spaces where learning is part of the business conversation, where you're actively driving that. It could be something like creating a skills council. It could be a learning community. It could be regular stakeholder roundtables. It could be an annual learning conference that you host internally for your organization. You're bringing together these champions of learning and you're making them part of the dialogue rather than seeing us as something separate from the business. We become integrated in the business. Ultimately, it's about establishing a voice, but using your voice and making sure that it's just not our L&D jargon, our Kirkpatrick, our level 3, our ROI, all these things that are meaningless outside of our world, and making sure that it's meaningful to them. And I would wrap it up with, and I think Rob was alluding to this as well, it comes down to us being value seekers, value creators. Because when we can articulate the value that we're creating and we're providing, leaders start listening.
I think that's right. The second part of that question, I'm going to throw up to the four of you, and that is, what's the best way for a university to get the attention of a company as a potential trusted learning advisor?
You know, I'm going to want to jump in, Ron. That was like
I
beautifully teed
know.
up. No, but I do think that there is a big value in partnerships in this space because it can be hard for an employer to partner with, 30, 50 different providers to get, like a variety of options to target those for skill development for each. And I mean, there's a constellation of ways to partner, but I would say definitely universities, and I've spent almost 2 decades working for colleges and universities, not always the best at like client relationship management because it is like a different kind of skill set. And so you do have to work towards adoption. You have to actually partner with the organization. You can't just send them a catalog of stuff, right? So I do think that's where there are a number of businesses in this space that are sort of matchmakers that can help so that it's easier on the part of the business to take advantage of what you offer. The second thing I would say is you better be offering the right things, right? So employers are looking for very specific things, either in the field that they are looking for, or we see a lot of like a degree is just way too big, but it doesn't have to be an either or. it should really be a both and, because people are also interested in those longer form credentials. So I think it's definitely, the content has to be relevant, the content has to be current, it has to be delivered in an engaging way, and it can't be like, you can't have a 2.5 hour long lecture. Nobody's ingesting that. You know, like they're not all in taking a PhD program like Jeff is, but they probably have other big things going on in their lives, right? You're only ever, one of my other mentors said, you're only ever someone's third priority if you're the learning part of their life. It comes after their family and after their job. So you have to be respectful of the time that they have to learn.
It's a lot of sense. You know, as you're thinking about what we've been talking about in terms of transformation, to our listening audience, thanks for bringing these questions forward. We appreciate it. It's nice to feel, in some respects, like we're having a dialogue with all of you because there's so much to explore here. What I want to explore now is future state. You know, several of you referenced the fact that the pace of change is happening so quickly. So, if you were to draw a line in the sand, 5 years from now, what would each of you say that you're most confident is going to be happening that's not happening now in the world of transformative AI, in the world of learning and upskilling? Rob, I'm going to put it to you first.
Great, because my answer is a lot, so that's very specific. But I do think there are things. I think we're at like the beta version of where we are of where we are right now from an AI perspective, right? We're all sort of learning. Well, actually, even before sort of generative AI has been around for a little while. So I think that the generative AI scenario is sort of maturing. What's the next? What's the next wave? Agentic. I mean, I hear that name thrown around a lot. So where AI begins doing things for you, I think that seems to be sort of the next version that we're getting to. What happens after that? I don't know, but I do think that it, like anything, I always used to joke about this about reporting, is when I would put a custom report in front of somebody, it would always result in 15 other reports that I had to generate because it would trigger all these other ideas. Well, what about if we look at it this way? And what if we look at it this way? I do think AI actually is following a similar pattern where, where the solution steps forward on generative, and then people are like, well, if I can get it to do this, can I get it to do work for me? And agentic is born. Well, now that agentic's in place, if I can get it to do that, can I get it to do the next thing? I think that's sort of an important sort of consideration in the mix. I also think that 5 years from now, potentially quantum computing could be coming closer to mainstream. I'm seeing more and more sort of reality examples than sort of hype examples. And I do think that that could be a very profound, have a very profound impact on sort of the way many businesses are run, and be super disruptive as it gets to mainstream.
It's interesting you say that because in a recent podcast with Sean Brem at Spectral Capital, he was talking about the power of quantum computing. And this was just as Google launched a quantum computing app, and it was able to solve problems that took our fastest supercomputer today 6 septillion years to solve, and it was able to do it in 5 years. We're talking about, you just unleashed a conversation about a gobsmacking new technology. It is so powerful. One of the things he pointed out is the only reason why it'll take time to surpass the impact of AI is simply because the number of people who are advancing it as a practice and advancing the applications and all that are so few and far between. It takes a person with a wicked brain set and IQ to really delve into this and to really move the needle with quantum computing. So I think that's the only break on its growth and trajectory.
People will upskill themselves to get there. So it's keeping
Yes.
in the frame of this conversation. And then I think new skills will be needed. For example, that septillion of years or whatever the number is.
That's great.
If you want to get more deviant about it, cracking passwords will take seconds, right? And so the whole infrastructure of the way we access things, the whole way we keep things secure, all those things will have to change. and that'll mean new skills for all of us, and many people inside all of our organizations.
So, Jeff, what are you seeing in terms of what do you expect to see over the next few years unfold with where we're at right now?
Yeah, I would say my hope and desire, certainly, and I believe it's very possible because there's so much reliance right now on the learning and development space in healthcare to help fix retention. I mean, when you really, and also to really focus on building career pathways earlier, right? I mean, when you look at the investment that's occurring in our country through Bloomberg Philanthropies and others to further develop healthcare connected high schools, much of that falls to learning and development to kind of find the way with the departmental functional leaders to create that stickiness that ultimately builds a future ready sustainable workforce. But what's interesting about that is in healthcare we are not resourced well enough to really sustain from a learning and development standpoint. I mean, when you look at the largest healthcare systems, learning and development is usually very, very small, very, very small budget, very, very small team. And, frankly, my hope and desire is that will, grow, tenfold because to Keith's point, the only way, in my opinion, that healthcare can have a future ready sustainable workforce is to have a trusted learning, leader who's at the C-suite level that is, addressing and preparing and planning and, implementing what's really required in this space. I tell people all the time, healthcare is a space that has never really truly had career pathways. We have chutes and ladders. And so for those that played chutes and ladders back in the day of their kids' games, or me in my case with my kids today, that's healthcare. Finally, we're starting to talk about and starting to implement more true, authentic career pathways. And I think AI, to Keith's point, when you think about skills architecture, can play a pivotal role in really creating a stronger framework for that type of work, Ron. And so that gives me great hope that we'll actually have structure in the future.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Keith, what about you? What are your thoughts on what the future will hold?
Gen AI in particular is a potential equalizer. We all who are privileged enough to have a smartphone, a mobile device, have access to this amazing tool that can democratize education. What I hope to continue to see is leveraging and taking advantage of that across the globe. You have a coach, you have a mentor, you have all of this knowledge available to you in your pocket. We would go to Google and we would search and we'd have to find other humans' perspectives, and most likely 99 million hits come back and it's opinion based. And so you didn't necessarily know where to go. Now we have something that can know us. It can speak like us, or it can speak and think like somebody that we teach it to speak like. I use it as a personal coach every single day. And so what I would say is for the next 5 years, I expect to see the continued growth and advantage and opportunity of all of us having access to this type of tool and coach and mentor. That being said, we still have a massive portion of the world that doesn't have the internet yet. And so we'd say,
Right.
yes, on one hand, this is an equalizer, it's democratizing education. It's like, well, on the other hand, there are people that still don't have electricity, still don't have the internet. So we're still creating this massive imbalance of the haves and have-nots. So I'd like to see this imbalance rise so that we still have this continued equitability.
Equitability. Before we close out our session, we have a few minutes left, and I want to get to some of these other questions. Here's one that I'll throw up in the air, and any one of you can catch it and pitch it. In recent L&D industry forums, L&D professionals expressed concerns about their roles being restructured out despite upskilling for leveraging AI. How do you address the duality of AI upskilling and job loss when employers decide to have less L&D professionals when they increase the use of their AI?
I'll jump in real quick because for me it's easy. We have to evolve ourselves. I don't label myself as a learning practitioner. I'm a problem solver. Organizations are always going to have problems. I just happen to solve problems through talent development because that's our most important resource and asset. And so what I encourage my team and all practitioners is get outside of this box that I'm just training, I'm just learning, and figure out where are the problems in the organization and be the linchpin to solve those problems. helps.
Yeah,
I think you said
I'll
that
just
at the
pile
beginning.
on.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to
Yep,
pile
go
on
ahead, Rob.
Keith's comment there, and I think it's, you can find lots of ways to add value in the organization if you think, as Keith mentioned, beyond sort of the boundaries of your function and the boundaries of your work. And if you keep that mindset on how do I help my organization win, and look for those ways with the skill set that you have, which may be expertise in learning science, let's just say, I think that you can actually um, work through a lot of those issues. Organizations will always find money when they see value in what you're trying to pitch, regardless of the financial situation or the economic
Right.
conditions that are going on. So
Yep.
if you can make the case for what you're doing and how it's helping drive the business forward, you tend to be less susceptible to those times where the organization shrinks.
Right.
Yeah, the only thing I would
Jeff, this
add,
is, go ahead. And then
I
there's a
was going to
question, a
say,
specific question for you. So go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say quickly, the only thing I would add to that is that one of the things in healthcare that I find really intriguing is that actually clinical leaders are finding phenomenal value in generative AI to amplify and sort of help with some of the learning and teaching on the clinical unit. And so if I were an L&D leader in healthcare or an L&D professional in healthcare, I think the opportunity is how do you think about, to Keith's point, how do you help them to further scale that? Because ultimately those leaders don't have the time to be doing it with their department. How do you scale that in a way that actually brings back the beauty of what learning and development is? And so from my vantage point, there's great opportunities in that space.
Here's the question. Jeff pointed out that the healthcare industry has been using AI for over a decade. Has the recent generative AI boom magnified the scarcity of talent that's trained in artificial intelligence?
I don't believe so. Not in healthcare, right? I mean, the reality of it is, right, is now I will say this is where you'll hear me get a little challenged, right? I think academia has a better opportunity to do more to train and teach our future healthcare workforce about the role of AI. And from a clinical decision making, because what I find is a lot of individuals will come into healthcare and they won't necessarily understand the full breadth and depth of how AI has been involved for a very long time. That's academia's responsibility because ultimately academia needs to train them and teach them when they're coming into those programs and ultimately come into the employer. They should not be just hearing about that when they do a clinical experience. That's not how this should work. But in terms of like the system, I will say where healthcare has work to do is to further talk about all the different avenues. So to Sasha's point with generative AI, you know, like I said, I'm encouraged. I'm hearing more and more clinical leaders talk about how they're using it to kind of, amplify certain clinical skills that are not hands-on, but things that they should just be aware of. I think to Keith's point, it can be incredibly helpful when we think about health equity, which I know, in some circumstances right now, we're not to talk about that at least under some of the executive orders. But the reality of it is you can't advance quality care without that.
That's correct.
And so it's great opportunities for us to take those type of topics and educate a workforce that has to be continually educated. I look at generative AI in healthcare as like an adjacency to continuing education. And I think that's required at all times. Now, you'll always hear me say, how do we make sure that the skills that they're learning that they're learning then are actually getting attributed and getting recognized? That's what we also have to do.
That makes a lot of sense. So, Sasha, you've hosted this and sponsored this wonderful conversation with all of you, and it's been really a privilege for me to just listen to you guys and keep up with what you're saying. A lot to process here. I'm going to give you the benefit of the remaining minute to share any last minute
Ah,
thoughts you have about this session. So I'll put you on the spot and leave our other guests off the hook on that one and let you kind of wrap it for us. And then at 3 o'clock, we're ending this, but I think we'll all be willing to stay on a couple minutes. If there are any other questions, you can go out there and post them now, and we'll take a few
yes.
minutes to answer any more.
I know that Keith has a hard stop, so thank you, Keith, as well. Really appreciate your
Yep.
time. I have all sorts of sticky notes, and I've been taking notes on what some of these amazing folks have been saying. I think for as we move forward, we have seen so much splintering and so much personalization across really across fields, right? So increased specialization means you have to have access to continuing skill building all the time. But I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see hyper personalization across all sorts of industries. And I think you're going to have your AI buddy help you with your specific deficits when you're doing a specific skill in the workplace. And that seems like amazing and terrifying all at the same time. And I think our own capacity, it is limited by our capacity for change. And there's probably a whole nother session about change management around this, because we still need the humans in all of this development, because we're the ones who are teaching AI. I ran into someone at the conference that I was at in Florida last week, who was wearing the new glasses, which these are not, by the way, but the new Meta glasses, and just talking about what it could do and what it couldn't do. Like, I wanted to see pictures in it, and they're not there yet, but it's gathering data on you, right? So all of these technologies are learning from us, and that's a big responsibility as well. So I think the future becomes sort of what we teach it to be.
Interesting. I want to take this opportunity to thank our listening audience for joining us today. I think you were richly rewarded with a lot of insight. If you have other questions, please send them to us and we will make sure to get them answered. Thank you for attending our SkillsWave webinar today. For more information, you can go to skillswave.com to see the wonderful work that Sasha and her team are doing. Rob Lauber, Jeffrey Roach, and Keith Keating, you guys have been, as usual, amazing and inspiring and insightful, and I appreciate so much the time to spend with you today. Thanks again to all of you listening, and until the next time.
Thanks for watching our SkillsWave webcast. If you're looking to streamline how employees discover, request, and register for high-impact upskilling while making education benefits easier to manage, visit skillswave.com to see how the free-to-use platform works.